There are some historical photographs that have never been fully explained. Some were examined by Kodak, some were investigated by police, some went all the way to the Society for Psychical Research and the United States House of Representatives. In every one of them, something appears in the frame that should not be there, a figure, an object, or a person whose identity no one has ever managed to confirm. The Royal Air Force Squadron photograph, 1919. When a Royal Air Force squadron was being disbanded, most likely at Royal Air Force Cranwell in Lincolnshire, a group photograph was taken to mark the occasion. Behind the fourth man from the left in the back row, a faint additional face appeared where no face should be, a ghostly presence that startled everyone who saw it. Surviving members identified him as aircraft man Freddie Jackson, a mechanic they said had been killed 2 days earlier by a spinning propeller, and whose funeral had reportedly taken place on the same day the photograph was taken. Air Marshal Sir Robert Victor Goddard published the story in his 1975 book Flight Towards Reality, and that is when research began complicating the picture. Independent investigators searching Commonwealth War Graves Commission and Royal Air Force casualty files have never found a Freddie Jackson matching Goddard's account. The only plausible candidate, Frederick William Jackson, died of heart failure in October 1918, months before the date Goddard gave. The ghostly face is also bald, while every other man in the photograph wears a regulation cap. Most photo analysts today lean toward a double exposure, a reshot plate taken because the first attempt had not come out properly. Whether Freddie Jackson ever existed at all remains an open question. Write in the comments where you are watching from. Curious to see how far this reaches. The Brown Lady of Raynham Hall, 1936. On September 19, 1936, Country Life magazine sent 2 photographers to Raynham Hall in Norfolk, a building carrying a 2-century-old ghost legend known as the Brown Lady, traditionally identified with Lady Dorothy Walpole, sister of Britain's first Prime Minister. Working on the Grand Staircase, assistant Indre Shira claimed he saw a vaporous form taking shape on the stairs, shouted to his colleague Captain Hubert Provand, and Provand triggered the flash. Country Life ran the photograph on Boxing Day, 1936, and Life magazine reprinted it in America the following month. The Society for Psychical Research investigated in 1937 and noted that the camera's bellows may have allowed light to leak in. Researchers in 1987 identified specific markers of a double exposure. They pointed to a pale line above each stair tread and a patch of reflected light on the banister that appears twice in the frame. That was a conclusion Joe Nickel reached independently in Skeptical Inquirer in 2008. Both photographers insisted the image was genuine until the day they died. No Brown Lady has been sighted at Raynham Hall since. The Dyatlov Pass photograph, 1959. 9 Soviet ski hikers, led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, set out into the northern Urals in late January 1959. On the night of February 1st, something drove them to cut their way out of their own tent and flee into roughly minus 30 degrees. All 9 died. Their cameras were recovered and the film developed, and one frame, number 134, became infamous, showing a bright, out-of-focus octagonal shape against total darkness, presented for decades as possibly the last thing the hikers ever photographed. The octagonal shape matches almost exactly the 8-bladed aperture of the Industar 22 lens used on their cameras. The current consensus among photographers and Dyatlov Pass investigators is that the frame was never taken on the mountain at all. Most likely, it was a spurious exposure made in the darkroom when the collapsible lens was retracted and the shutter accidentally fired. In July 2020, the Russian Prosecutor General's office concluded the hikers died in a delayed slab avalanche, backed by peer-reviewed engineering analysis published in Communications, Earth and Environment. The photograph, long mythologized as the final image of 9 dying hikers, appears to have been a darkroom accident. The Babushka Lady, 1963. At approximately 12:30 on November 22, 1963, in Dealey Plaza in Dallas, the same unidentified woman appears in multiple amateur films of the Kennedy assassination, including the Zapruder film, the Nix film, the Muchmore film, and the Bell film. She is wearing a tan overcoat and a triangular Russian-style headscarf, holding a camera to her face. After the fatal shot, while witnesses around her drop to the ground or run for cover, she remains standing and continues filming. She then crosses Elm Street, walks east, and is never identified again. In 1979, the United States House Select Committee on Assassinations formally noted in its final appendix that her film had never been located. A Dallas Kodak technician told investigators that a woman matching the description had a color film developed that same afternoon. He described the results as extremely blurry and useless, and she never returned to collect it. In 1970, a Dallas singer named Beverly Oliver came forward claiming to be the Babushka Lady. Her account was rejected by mainstream scholarship because the camera model she said she used was not manufactured until 1969. 60 years later, her identity and the fate of her film both remain unknown. If this is the kind of history you want more of, subscribing helps us keep going. The Solway, Firth Spaceman, 1964. On May 23, 1964, Carlisle fireman Jim Templeton took his wife and 2 daughters onto Berg Marsh overlooking the Solway Firth and photographed his 5-year-old daughter, Elizabeth. When the middle frame came back from Kodak developing, a figure in what appeared to be white spacesuit clothing, complete with a visor, stood just behind her right shoulder. Templeton insisted no one else had been on the marsh that day. Kodak reportedly examined the negative and found no signs of tampering. Carlisle police took a formal statement. The story reached the Cumberland News in June 1964 and later entered British Ministry of Defence records. Dr. David Clark of Sheffield Hallam University, who has consulted with the UK National Archives on the Ministry of Defence's UFO files, points out that the Pentagon camera Templeton used had a viewfinder showing only about 70% of the photographed frame. That means his wife, wearing a light blue dress that day, could have stepped into the edge of the shot without him noticing, her dress overexposing to near white in bright sunlight. It is a plausible explanation that has never been forensically demonstrated, and Templeton maintained until his death in 2011 that the picture was real. The Tulip Staircase, 1966. On a Sunday afternoon in June 1966, retired Canadian minister Reverend Ralph Hardy visited the Queen's House in Greenwich and photographed the Tulip Staircase, the first self-supporting spiral staircase ever built in Britain, using a Zeiss Icon Cantina camera. The staircase was roped off, and both Hardy and his wife swore no one was on it. When the film came back from development in British Columbia, a hooded figure appeared to be climbing the stairs, its hand resting on the railing. Peter Underwood, then president of the Ghost Club in London, sent the negative to Kodak along with the frames taken immediately before and after. According to Underwood, Kodak found no sign of tampering and concluded that the only photographic explanation was that someone must have been on the stairway. Royal Museums Greenwich still presents the photograph as an unsolved mystery today. The Hessdalen Lights, 1981 to present. In the final weeks of 1981, in a remote Norwegian valley called Hessdalen, with a population of 140 people, residents began reporting unexplained lights in the sky at a rate of 15 to 20 sightings per week. The lights photograph as white, yellow, or red luminous balls ranging from small bright spheres up to an estimated 30 meters across. Some drift slowly, some sit motionless for over an hour. One radar measurement from 1985 clocked a light moving at roughly 30,000 kilometers per hour. Erling Strand founded Project Hessdalen in 1983, and it is still running, with a permanent automatic measurement station recording the valley since 1998, and peer-reviewed papers appearing in the Journal of Scientific Exploration and the Journal of Atmospheric and Solar Terrestrial Physics. A 2024 electromagnetic survey published in the Journal of Applied Geophysics identified a large body of conductive sulfide minerals beneath the valley floor, leading to theories involving dusty plasmas, piezoelectric rock strain, and what some researchers describe as a natural geological battery, none of which fully accounts for what is being photographed. The lights are still appearing today. Write in the comments which of these you find most difficult to explain. The answers are always the most interesting part. The Falling Man, 2001. At 9:41 and 15 seconds in the morning on September 11th, 2001, Associated Press photographer Richard Drew stood at the corner of West Street and Vesey Street in Lower Manhattan and took a sequence of 12 photographs of a man falling headfirst from the north face of the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Roughly 200 people fell or were forced from the Twin Towers that morning, and the New York City Medical Examiner's Office classified every one of those deaths as a homicide. The office refused to use the word jumpers, writing instead that the victims were forced out by smoke and flames or blown out. The photograph ran once on page 7 of the New York Times the following morning, and then effectively disappeared after readers described it as ghoulish. It returned to public view in 2003 when journalist Tom Junod published a 7,000-word essay in Esquire and identified a leading candidate, Jonathan Eric Briley, a 43-year-old audio engineer who worked on the 106th and 107th floors of the North Tower at the restaurant Windows on the World. His brother Timothy identified his body from his distinctive black high-top shoes, but the Briley family has never issued a unified formal confirmation, and no other identification has ever been made. The subject of the most famous photograph taken that morning is, officially, still unknown. 8 photographs were examined by Kodak, by police, by federal investigators, by university physicists, and by the Society for Psychical Research. In some cases, the weight of evidence now points toward a mundane explanation, such as a wife who wandered into a frame, a darkroom accident, or a double exposure. In others, including the Babushka Lady, the Falling Man, and the lights above Hessdalen, the central question has stayed unresolved for decades, and at least one of them is still being actively investigated right now.